Bullitt, the 1968 action crime thriller, is a classic, groundbreaking film despite many major flaws. Steve McQueen is iconic as San Francisco detective Frank Bullitt, but we learn too little about Bullitt to care much about him. We never receive adequate plot information to understand what the detective is ever doing. Bullitt is not a good cop. This much is obvious. He's assigned to protect a star witness from exceptionally vicious gangsters. He arranges for himself and 2 other cops to guard the witness at a dinky downtown hotel, and then he goes home. He leaves the witness in the hands of the youngest and most inexperienced member of his team. It isn't long before a pair of hitmen show up. Did it ever occur to Bullitt that the witness would be safer in a holding cell at his precinct or a faraway cabin in a secluded part of the state? The witness survives the hitmen, who are obviously as incompetent as Bullitt. So now, Bullitt gets a second chance to protect the witness. But he still isn't very protective. Why is Bullitt never near the hospital room? Why is he always down the hall, either talking on the phone or drinking coffee? One of the hitmen casually strolls into the hospital. He asks a doctor where he can find the man who was brought in for bullet wounds. The doctor knows that a man was shot up by hitmen, and the hitman will likely want to finish the job. He knows that the police are guarding the man. So, what does he do?
Well, he could be up on the 2nd floor in the emergency room.
Thanks, doctor.
Then he calls Bullitt to warn him. Maybe he should have pretended that he didn't know where the guy was and quickly got on the phone to Bullitt. The visitor is 5'10" and has white hair. This was a description that the wounded cop provided Bullitt on his way to the hospital. So, Bullitt is sure that this is his guy. The badass cop gets ready for him, right? No. How else would the hitman be able to make it up to the 2nd floor, saunter down the hallway, slip into the witness's room, and stab his victim repeatedly with no one around to stop him? Look how far away Bullitt is as the hitman escapes. Bullitt senses that something is wrong. Who did the witness call while under guard at the hotel? Why did he remove the door latch prior to the arrival of the hitmen? Bullitt senses that the murder was part of a sinister conspiracy. He decides to hide the fact that the witness is dead while he figures out what on earth is going on. The screenwriter wrote dialogue to clarify the plot, but McQueen wanted his character to talk as little as possible. He figured that it would make Bullitt cool to be a laconic tough guy, so he tossed out pages of dialogue. Donald of Goodreads wrote, "The plot is so much clearer and understandable in the book. So much." Jeff of Goodreads wrote, "The movie is best described as murky, with little explained and at times making little to no sense. But hey, it has a car chase. Thankfully, the book makes more sense." Quentin Tarantino wrote, "The story itself is more or less simple to follow. What's unclear, especially during the middle section, is exactly what Bullitt's up to, or why he does half the things he does. And if you think about it later, some of the things he does don't make sense, at least not narrative sense. But as you watch, as you follow him breezing through San Francisco, it makes emotional movie sense." One of the producers of the film, Philip D'Antoni, would also make The French Connection a few years later, and he followed the same narrative strategy in that film as well. The audience doesn't know what's going on half the time in The French Connection either. We know Popeye Doyle's after the French guy with the gray beard, but none of the procedural shit means anything to us. It's just lively, busy, and sort of exciting, like Bullitt. I find the film less exciting than Mr. Tarantino. Bullitt has great star power, spectacular location photography, a legendary car chase, a mesmerizing coolness, a moody jazz score, and stylish directing. But it doesn't have characters and it doesn't have a story. It has set pieces in place of plot development. It has lingering close-ups of the handsome leading man in place of character development. I watch a film for the characters and the story. But nowadays, a significant part of Hollywood's fan base has little concern for story and characters. They have seen every story played out more times than they care to remember. They have seen every possible type of character resolve every possible type of conflict with every possible type of antagonist. They want a unique, visceral experience. Hollywood is no longer in the storytelling business. This is what comes from the public being gorged on films and television shows. Their brains have been broken. Quentin Tarantino rightly believes that Bullitt was a powerful antidote to the 2 decades of police procedural films that had come before it. The style over substance film is a film that never tells us anything but is filled with visual flair and thrilling flourishes. But let's be honest, it is a cheap trick to hide script weakness under jaw-dropping visuals and shocking acts. Stephen Barker of Screen Rant cited Ocean's 12, 2004, and Sucker Punch, 2011, as style over substance films. Pauline Kael found Obsession, 1976, to be no more than an exercise in style with the camera whirling around nothingness. Ajay Aravind of CBR noted of John Wick, 2014, the film replaced plot with magnificently choreographed combat scenes. Suicidal ice cream truck driver of IMDb wrote of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, 2010, "It's a fun film, a nice all-style, no-substance film to take your mind off your problems and to take a trip into a comic book world. Yay for entertainment." Three directors who have often been accused of focusing on style over substance are Baz Luhrmann, Sofia Coppola, and Dario Argento. Noah Smith of Far Out magazine found that in reviewing Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby 2013, he couldn't help but focus on the film's lavish style. He wrote, "The film excels with its extravagant costumes, top-tier production design, and fantastic parties." He said that the film makes you wish you were back in the roaring 20s. But, he noted, The Great Gatsby disappointed some viewers with its excessive style over substance approach, overshadowing the depth of F. Scott Fitzgerald's book. The film struggled to capture the emotional complexity and societal critique that made the book so well-loved and timeless today. Joe Morgenstern, writing for the Wall Street Journal, decried The Great Gatsby as a spectacle in search of a soul. Bob Mondello of NPR wrote, Baz Luhrmann's new film version of The Great Gatsby features soaring shots of a digitized 1920s New York, digitized mansions, even digitized mountains of coal furnace refuse in a dump. Everything about the film is overstuffed, overdecorated, and constantly in motion, including passages from the novel's text that materialize on screen. It's the great American novel as fever dream, and if emotions and character get lost in all the disco ball glitz, well, how could they not? Charles Barnes of Taste of Cinema wrote, "What does one often hear in general dismissals of Luhrmann's films? It generally comes down to intolerance for movies that are all razzle-dazzle, flashy sets, but without any kind of worthy narrative or players." Jake Coyle wrote of Sofia Coppola's Somewhere, 2010. Coppola is brilliant at capturing mood. Her languid camera depicts California melancholy, but substance isn't her game. Barnes wrote, Somewhere raised more questions about the absolute sincerity behind Coppola's artistry, whether meaning and urgency truly pervaded her work, or merely overindulgence in visual flavor and self-importance. Smith wrote, Dario Argento's 1977 Italian horror masterpiece Suspiria dazzles with its vibrant color palette, haunting score, and atmospheric cinematography. The film's stylized visuals, filled with vivid reds and elaborate set designs, create an immersive experience. However, the narrative can feel secondary to the artistic flair, as the film relies heavily on its stylistic choices to move audiences. Rafael Costa of Taste of Cinema wrote, Suspiria, like most giallo, has a very loose plot, and it's mostly concerned with the visuals of horror, with the emotional and psychological imagery that provokes a chill down the spine, and what unbelievable images they are. What Argento and his whole team achieve here is something that takes the basic core concepts of the genre and takes it into a whole other level entirely. Production designer Giuseppe Bassan creates unforgettable geometrical rooms that defy architectural logic, which create an often disturbing, confounding, and impressive look that contributes to the otherworldly atmosphere of the film. But those sets wouldn't have half the same power if they weren't lensed by cinematographer Luciano Tovoli, who lights everything with one of the most expressive uses of color in the history of cinema. Every single frame is bathed by vivid red or pink or blue, intense and always present, creating not only a magnificent aesthetic, but also a dreamlike quality that many strive for, but few can achieve. Suspiria may be a bit meandering and its story may even sound goofy, but the sheer visual brilliance achieved here is simply unparalleled and a monument to behold. The spine-chilling visuals of horror that Costa writes about work perfectly well in Suspiria. But it's not only action films and horror films that eschew story for spectacle. Can you imagine a love story that sidesteps the lovers to give priority to perfectly arranged and beautifully lit images of food? That's what we have with The Taste of Things, 2023. Fans of the film will argue that it is soulful. Hey, they might say, look at the heartfelt way that she is preparing that baked Alaska. But is that really soulful? Costa defended these allegedly soulless films. He wrote, "To invoke an emotion simply with the use of sound and image is the true challenge of any and all filmmakers. So, at the end of the day, many movies that carry the stigma of being style over substance may not be as profound as others, but they are just as much of an achievement, just a different way. That is not to say that there aren't movies that do get carried away with visuals and forget all the other important aspects of filmmaking, but there are several examples of movies that prove that when done, style becomes the substance." I myself question Costa's belief that style becomes the substance. These filmmakers don't care about intricate narratives or profound themes. They prefer to captivate audiences with sheer visual splendor and stylistic bravado. Their work heavily promotes the power of aesthetics in storytelling. It has been argued by some critics that although these films sacrifice depth and character development for visual spectacle, they represent a legitimate form of cinematic expression. These overpoweringly visual films challenge traditional notions of storytelling by emphasizing sensory engagement over intellectual stimulation. Blade Runner's hauntingly beautiful cityscapes, combined with Vangelis's ethereal score, create an immersive experience that lingers with audiences long after the credits roll. In these films, mood and setting are not mere backdrops, but active elements that shape the viewer's experience. Fine, but this is not cinema, not the art form that was established by filmmakers for more than a century. Martin Scorsese sees these films not as cinema, but as theme park rides. Scorsese specifically commented on the visually spectacular Marvel movies. He said, "It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." You're right, Mr. Scorsese, it isn't. People get angry about that. Peter Ramsey, director of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, childishly retorted, "Marvel movies are fun and good. Chill." Ramsey and others can have their fun. Have all of the fun that they want, but that is not what a film is. I accept that art evolves. This much change, though, makes a Marvel movie and a John Ford movie entirely different creations.